Much gratitude that we welcome Chad P. from Austin, Texas, who's come to share for about 30 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing. Chad, thank you. It's really wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Jan, for asking me to come do this. It's an honor to get to come talk with you guys, spend the morning, well, for me, the morning with you guys. My name's Chad Payne. I'm alcoholic. I'm sober since April the 2nd of 2003. And my online home group is the Primary Purpose Group, which originated in Austin. The one that I'm on did, and we meet on Wednesday nights on Zoom. So let's see, that would be late at night for you guys, and we actually do have some folks from the UK that log on in the middle of the night. But we're a book study, and we study the big book very slowly, and what we do there that's a little bit different than some other book studies is we try to leave our experience out of the discussion as much as possible and really focus on what the text is saying. We believe experience is the lifeblood of AA, but we just have this one meeting where we really try to study the book and then learn to do what it's saying a little bit more effectively and learn how to carry its message a little more effectively. So anyway, that's what we do there. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to keep my eyes on the time here. I've got about 30 minutes, and on page 29 in the big book, it says each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. And that's what I want to talk about for the next half hour. And you know, it's interesting. I came into AA very much agnostic, probably atheist. And I just thought all this God business was nonsense. But what I didn't realize is that I had began establishing a relationship with God before I ever walked into AA. And that's what this journey has been over the last almost 20 years in recovery is to continue to establish that relationship. And that relationship is not necessarily based on what I believe. It's much more based on what I do and what kind of an experience that I have. That's kind of what I've discovered. But before I get into that, let me kind of start from the beginning. I did pretty good as a kid, and I started to struggle around the time I was maybe 11 years old, 12, something like that. I started to get a little insecure, self-conscious. I started to look at the world in a negative light. A lot of my attention was focused on how I didn't fit in, how I wasn't good enough, how I didn't belong, how nobody really liked me, wishing that I could be this way or that so that I would be okay. And that's just what it was like to live in here. And none of that stuff was really true. I actually, was doing pretty well, but that's what my head told me. And a couple years later, I solved that problem. I had a couple drinks, and I didn't know that it was solving a problem at the time. I just knew it was a lot of fun. So drinking became the most important thing in my life. And we did, where I live, we did a lot of drinking and a lot of partying as a teenager. And it became number one. Anything that got in the way of drinking just kind of had to be, gone around or pushed over to the side. What drinking did for me is it got me out of my head and into the world. What I understand today is that life is awesome. But I didn't know that at the time. And I couldn't experience this awesome life. I couldn't experience a good life because I was so trapped in this pattern of thought that went on in this head all the time. But alcohol freed me from that so that I could relax and be present and experience you and experience this world. And that's why it seemed to be so much fun to me. I have fun today, lots of fun, more fun than I ever had when I was drinking. And the reason for that is because I get freedom from this head, from this mind. But that freedom today comes through spiritual living rather than alcohol, because the alcohol didn't work for very long. But here's the interesting thing about that. If you listen to a lot of AA speakers, which I know you guys do, you hear that as a common theme. I didn't feel very good, felt like I didn't belong, and then I discovered alcohol and it solved those problems. But that's not what makes me alcoholic. That's actually a really common thing. There are teenagers all over the world who don't feel good, and they get a couple drinks in them, smoke a joint, take a pill, whatever it may be. They do something to change that, and then they feel better. And it's doing the same thing to them it was doing to me. It's getting them out of their heads, living in the present moment, and experiencing the world with the freedom that we're supposed to have. Does that make all those teenagers alcoholic? Well, no, not at all. So if that's not what makes me alcoholic, then what does? And it seems to be pretty important that we understand that in this book. It tells me on page 30, it says we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people has to be smashed. It's saying that I have this delusion that I'm like other people, but I'm not. I'm different. I'm alcoholic. And I have to surrender to my alcoholism. But if I'm going to surrender to it, I have to know what it means. And it seems trivial to the newcomer to say we need for you to understand what alcoholism is, because as a newcomer, I'm saying, that's stupid. I know what alcohol, obviously I'm an alcoholic. I wouldn't be in AA if I wasn't an alcoholic. Well, maybe that's true, but the idea that I understand it just because I showed up at a meeting, well, that may not be true. And in my case, it definitely wasn't. I knew I was a drunk, but that's different. That's different. There's a big difference in a drunk and an alcoholic. So as an alcoholic, I have two problems. Well, I have a lot of problems, but I have two problems in common with all the other alcoholics in the world. And those two problems that I have in common, number one, the book calls it a physical allergy. I call it an alcohol problem. So the problem that I have with alcohol is once I take a couple of drinks, I lose control. I don't know what's going to happen next. Sometimes on a pretty good day, what happens is, I go to the bar with coworkers for happy hour, and the plan is we're going to have a couple of drinks, stay for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then go home to our families. Well, after I have a couple, they go down fast and smooth, maybe in about 10 minutes. So I decide I'll go ahead and have a third one, and then a fourth. And then I've got to call home and say, hey, I'm going to be a little bit late. We're working late. I'll be late. I'm going to have enough. Next thing I know, the bar is closing, and I'm looking for the party. Well, I can tell you what it turned into later in my experience. I'll tell you a story. One night I had come home from a construction job. I'd been out on the road working for a while. I came home. I had a wife and a baby daughter at home. And we fought a lot because I was still drinking and my wife had straightened up when she got pregnant. But this night we weren't fighting. I'd come home off this job and we're watching a movie. And my daughter's playing in the floor. She's maybe 1 or 2. She's very small. And she's playing the floor, and it's getting late. And my wife says, hey, I'm hungry. Go get us something to eat. And I'll put our daughter to bed. And then when you come home, we'll finish watching the movie. So I said, great, I'll do it. So I'm walking out the door, and I turn around, and I say, I'll be back in 20 minutes. Well, while I'm going to get food, I get this idea. tomorrow when my wife, she was taking classes in school. Well, she's at school. I'll get my daughter ready. I'll spend some time with her in the morning. I'll take her to daycare, and then I'll go meet a couple of my friends, and we'll go have some drinks and have some fun, whatever we were going to do. I come from Oklahoma, out in the country, so we I had a 4-wheel drive pick, so we were probably going to go drive off road and drink and shoot guns. That's probably what we were going to do. So that was the plan. Well, on the way, I get the food. I'm coming back, and I stop by a friend's house to let him know that I'm coming by tomorrow to pick him up. Well, there's a party going on, and he says, come on in. I'm like, no, I'm going home, but I'll be back tomorrow. He says, just come in for a minute and say hi to people. So I come in for a minute, and while I'm in, I have a couple drinks. Well, next thing I know, it's midnight. Oh no, I'm in big trouble. Well, I can't go home now, because if I go home now, I'll really be in trouble. So next thing I know, it's daylight. I tell my friend, hey, we got to get out of here. She's going to come find me. There's going to be a big fight. So what happens is my 20-minute trip to go get food turns into 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, I don't go home. 2 weeks later, I get caught sneaking my golf clubs out of the garage at 4 o'clock in the morning. So that's what happens once I put a couple drinks in me, is I go on a run, and I don't know when it's going to stop. I lose control. Whatever my intentions were, when I take the drink takes me. And that happened over and over and over, and it destroyed everything good in my life. And I would continue to try to manage my drinking, and it didn't always look like that. I didn't always say, hey, I'm going to have 2, and then I ended up getting drunk. Sometimes I would say, hey, I'm going to get drunk. But when I said I was going to get drunk, I thought I was going to have a good time. But what would happen is I would go out and get drunk, but I would end up doing all kinds of things I didn't mean to do. Flirt with my best friend's girlfriend and get in a fight with him and get thrown out of the bar and go drink and drive and have a wreck and get arrested. All these things would happen that I didn't mean to happen, but that what they were is the result of a loss of control when I would start to drink. So there's a real simple solution to that, and that solution is just quit drinking. Obviously, I can't control my drinking, so the solution is to just quit. Well, that brings up problem number 2. Problem number 2 is not an alcohol problem. The second problem I have as an alcoholic happens when I'm sober. I can't blame it on the alcohol. It's a mental problem. As a matter of fact, the book calls it insanity. And what that problem is when I'm stone cold sober, no matter how bad it got last time I drank, no matter how much I have to lose, no matter the consequences, no matter how strong my desire to not pick up the first drink is, guess what I do? I pick up the first drink. I had a bad wreck. I was under the influence. I drove off I fell asleep. I drove off the wrong side of the road. I hit a tree. I spent a month in the hospital. I had broken bones all over my body, had surgeries. My big dysfunctional family showed up at the hospital. At one time, my dad was in the room, and 2 of his ex-wives and his current wife were all, I come from a big dysfunctional family, and I had pushed them all out of my life because of my drinking, because they stood in the way of my lifestyle. I pushed them out of my life, but when I was in the hospital after that wreck, they all showed up. And we all knew that the reason that I had that wreck and almost killed somebody and almost died myself, and the reason that I had destroyed my family before the wreck, and the reason that all these bad things were happening in my life and in the lives of those who loved me is because of my drinking. I knew that, they knew that, everybody knew it. So I looked people in the eye and said, I'm done. I'm not drinking anymore. No more. I quit. Not doing this anymore. I swear. I'm done. I admitted things to people. They cried. I cried. Done. I got home from the hospital. I'm back in the house with my wife and my little daughter. I'm on a walker and crutches. My jaws are wired shut. I can't use my right arm, which makes it really hard to use crutches. I mean, I'm in bad shape. And I was done drinking. That's it. This is ridiculous. I lasted 2 days. 2 days out of the hospital, and I'm staying out all night, drinking and partying again. My wife left, took the kid. The family said, forget it, we're done. And I was homeless. And I stayed that way for another couple years. Day after day saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go back. I'm going to, get some help, whatever I have to do. I'm not drinking. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I kept picking up again and again and again and again. Finally, I got this opportunity to go into a treatment center. But before I do that, I want to tell you this. There's a misunderstanding in AA of what it means to be an alcoholic. There's a misunderstanding. Almost everyone in AA understands the lack of control. But not everyone understands the insanity around the first drink. And here's how you know if someone understands it. If someone really understands what it means to be alcoholic, and they're really convinced that they have alcoholism, well, here's what they do. They get a sponsor, they work the steps, they get a home group, they get involved, and then they go carry the message. And they don't do it because they want to, or because they like it, or even because they believe in it. They do it because they understand the hopelessness of alcoholism. And they keep doing it because they know that just because they've been sober a little while doesn't mean that they're cured of alcoholism. See, I've been sober almost 20 years. In April will be 20 years, and that's not even that much time in AA. There's people with way more time than me. But there are a whole lot of people that never get double-digit sobriety. There are a whole lot of people that don't make it past the 5-year mark or whatever it may be. There are a whole lot of us that don't stay around very long, and the reason for that is because of an unwillingness to do the work outlined in this big book. Why would anyone not do it? Well, first of all, we don't want to do it. This book asks me to do things I don't want to do. But I'm willing to do those things because I know my life is on the line. And then once I start doing those things, I really like what I'm getting. But the thing that keeps me doing it is I know my life is on the line. I know that it doesn't matter how long I've been sober, that I can still pick up a drink. Not because I'm weak-willed or because bad things happen or because I get too busy or whatever it may be. The reason I can still pick up a drink is because I'm still alcoholic. And I'm not cured of alcoholism. I have a daily reprieve. Today, if I do what I'm supposed to do, well, then I got a really good shot at not picking up a drink. As a matter of fact, I'll call it a guarantee. And if I keep doing that over and over and over, then that as Dr. Bob says, it provides insurance. But if I stop doing that, I see it over and over. I might pick up a drink a few years down the road, a few months down the road, a few weeks, maybe a few days. I don't know how long I have. And I don't want to roll the dice with my life. So that's the hopelessness of alcoholism. Understanding all this is not enough. It takes action. And I've got to continue to do that action. Alcoholism is a hopeless condition. And that's what I discovered in those years after that wreck, is that no matter how bad I want to stop drinking and not pick up that first drink, I can't do it. And the really tricky part of alcoholism is the powerlessness over the first drink. That's the tricky part, the powerlessness. So no matter how unmanageable my life is, I still can't keep from picking up that first drink. Okay, so I went into this treatment center. I I don't remember what we did there. I know they introduced me to AA, and when I got out, I found you guys, and I went to meetings, and I came early before the meeting. I stayed late after the meeting. I cleaned out ashtrays. I made coffee. I set up chairs. I hung out with the people from the meetings, and that's what my program was based on. I was on every committee. I chaired meetings. I did all this stuff. After a while, I got tired of it. I got tired of being a member of AA, and I had been sober for a while, so I was about ready to quit. And this was somewhere between 6 months and a year. And I didn't think I needed it anymore. Why do I have to keep going to these meetings every day and these same people that say these same things? And I didn't like it. And then I met a guy. And this guy sit me down after a meeting, and he was from out of town. So my plan was to, be nice to the guy and talk to him a little bit about what we do and that kind of thing. Well, he knew what we do. He had been doing this a long time, and he was armed with the facts about himself. And he explained this stuff to me, and that 10-minute conversation that I planned to have with him after the meeting before I went home and watched TV or something turned into about a 2-hour conversation. And he disturbed me about my alcoholism. He 12-stepped me in sobriety. He helped me to understand what I just explained to you. And when he got done telling me about it, I was very uncomfortable because I realized something that I didn't know. What I realized is that I was about to leave AA and I was going to drink again. He helped me to understand the hopelessness of my condition. He helped me to understand that my mind was going to talk me out of AA if I didn't do something, but I didn't know what to do. I was going to meetings. I was coming early, staying late. I was involved. I was doing everything you were supposed to do, I thought. Then what he said to me, after he had me really upset, he said, "Chad, do you know what you need?" And I said, "No, Dave. What do I need?" And he said, "You need a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps." Oh, that's what these people have been talking about. See, I didn't think that applied to me. And where I was going to meetings, they read the steps in the beginning of the meeting, but nobody was really doing them. And that's why the people that were there when I got there 6 months later were no longer there. We had a high turnover because nobody was really taking these steps. So he became my sponsor, and we worked the steps, and it saved my life. But it was hard for me in the beginning because I'm an agnostic atheist. I'll go to your meetings, but I don't want to hear about God. And it wasn't that I had a resentment against the church. I just thought all spiritual things were nonsense. I don't care what it is. Eastern, Western, meditation, prayer, anything. I thought that was all the same as Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. It was all ridiculous to me. I thought it was nonsense. What I had was a step 2 problem. He helped me to grasp step 1, and then when he talked about a spiritual solution, I had a step 2 problem. And I see that a lot in AA. I hear it all the time. I'll hear it in question and answer sessions after I talk to people in treatment. But I have a step 2 problem, and I can't move on. Well, here's what I want to tell people is this. If you have a step 2 problem that keeps you from working the rest of the steps, it's not a step 2 problem, it's a step 1 problem. Because if I'm clear on step 1, it's okay. I don't have to believe in God. I'll still work the steps. And what happened for me as I worked these steps, I had an experience with a power that I didn't believe in. So when I'm sponsoring guys and we get to step 2, we'll talk very briefly about what the guy believes. But I'm really not interested in what he believes in step 2. What I tell a guy is, I tell you what, let's just set that aside, work these steps, not because you believe in God. work these steps because you don't want to die of alcoholism. And then after you work these steps and have this experience, then let's talk about what you believe, because it's going to be a lot different. I moved down to Austin, Texas, and I met my sponsor and his wife, and I got involved in the primary purpose group at about 5 years of sobriety. And I fell in love with this book, with the big book. And I learned a lot of new things. And the reason I have that reading in there, and I know I'm down to just a few minutes. Let me see. What do I have, about 5 or 10 minutes left, James? You keeping up with it?
Yep, absolutely. About 6 minutes, give or take, Chad.
Perfect. That's exactly what I need. I got down there and I learned something interesting when I fell in love with this big book. What I learned is that there's something that stops us, that blocks us from having the necessary spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening is the solution to alcoholism, and then to use that awakened spirit to carry the message. But I can't have a spiritual awakening because I'm blocked. It's not because I don't know about God, because you don't have to know about God to have a spiritual awakening. The reason I can't have one is because I'm blocked. Well, what's blocking me? What we read at the beginning of the meeting from As Bill Sees It, which is described really well on pages 60, 61, and 62 in the big book. And what it talks about there is the failure of self-will. I can't experience God because I'm playing God. I can't get the freedom of living in God's world because I am trying to control God's world. And I don't even know I'm doing it. It's all I know. I spend my life trying to arrange life to get what I want. I don't have a relationship with life. I have a relationship with the way I think life should be. And that's where my thoughts are always centered. Well, if they do this and they need to do that and the government needs to do this and this is not right and I was mistreated and what if this happens to me and I wish that that hadn't happened and I would have done this different. And what I need to learn to do is let all that go and go with the flow. Experience life as it is. And in that process, if I can do that, I develop a relationship with life. And life begins to unfold and work out in a beautiful way. And I begin to experience life. And that's what it's like to live with an awakened spirit. How do you do that? Well, that's what the rest of these steps are for. First, I write the inventory and I become aware of exactly, and I share it with somebody, and I become aware of exactly how I try to run the show. And then I take that to God in a meditation and I see these character defects. I go clean up the wreckage that's based on how I've been living and the effect that I've had on other people. And then I begin to live a spiritual life in the disciplines of steps 10 and 11, and then go out and carry this message and work with others in step 12. And I live in the fellowship, working with others in this spiritual way of life. And what happens is over time, I lose this obsession with arranging life to suit me. And I begin to develop this relationship with the way life is. And in the process, if God is everywhere, I develop a relationship with God, regardless of what I believe. So what I found throughout this process is that the beautiful thing about AA is they found the answer to alcoholism. And the answer to alcoholism is to work with other alcoholics. But that's not the whole thing. The answer is to work with other alcoholics from a state of surrender. Because I'm not useful to other alcoholics if I'm running the show. I'm useful if I'm living from a state of surrender. Because here's what happens. When I get into a state of surrender through working these steps, God begins to work through me. And what happens when God begins to work through me? I can be of real use to someone else. So God's working through me to help the other alcoholic. That's a superpower. That's what that is. So here's what I know today. If God's working through me to help the next alcoholic, there's no way I'm going to drink. There's no way. And not only am I not going to drink, in the process, regardless of my external circumstances, I can live a happy and useful life. And that's what we have available in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that was actually beautiful, Chad. Thank you so much. This is the second time I've had the privilege